Are you a huge fan of PowerPoint? If you are, you probably should stop watching this video right now, as I'm going to demonstrate why I prefer to use Adobe XD for creating interactive animated presentations. We will learn how to create a sticky menu, build animated components with states, add anchor links to slides, and even how to set up voice control for switching between artboards. So here we are in Adobe XD, and as you can see, I already have a couple of slides prepared. We have our main starting slide here on the top, and then we have these 3 additional slides below. But first, let's just build the main interactions. So from this first component, typography, I would like to move on to this next artboard. So I'm just using the little plus sign and drag the line out. By the way, I am in prototype mode, so this is when you can set up these interactions. And I am going to just simply use the trigger to be tap, and the transition I can change to something else later on, but for now I'm happy with the way it's set up by default. Now I'm going to do the same with color theory. I will drag that here, and then composition should go there. Now notice that composition is slightly smaller than these other ones, and that is because I haven't set this up exactly the same way yet. So let me show you first of all how this looks when we are testing it out. So to play the animation or to see it working, the prototype in action, I'm going to press Command or Control Enter. So that opens up this presentation view, and here I can show you that these 2 elements I already built as components with hover effects, and as you can see there's an auto animation already applied. Don't worry, because I'm going to show you exactly how to do this on this 3rd button. But now, because we added the interactions, I can also just simply click on it already, and as you can see we moved on to that next slide. And by the way, this slide is longer, so it automatically has the scroll function built into it as well, which I love. Now we don't have the back buttons connected yet to the original main slide, so let's just do that before we forget. I'm going to move here, select that little arrow, and just drag it back here. And the good thing is that because I have this arrow set up as a component and I use the same component on these other pages, when I select them, notice that they already have that interaction added. So I didn't have to repeat these steps. So let's test this out again. I go back in here, go to typography, scroll a bit, and then let's move back. Then go into color theory. We can also move around, and it works perfectly. So now it's time to build that hover effect on this 3rd button here. So first of all, I will switch back to design mode and zoom closer to this page. Command or Control 3 is the way you can zoom onto a specific artboard. And I will show you that these 2 here are created as components, including the text at the bottom. I also added 2 guides at the bottom, which will help me to create the animation, because notice when I switch to the hover state, not only the icon changes in color and slightly in size and even orientation, but also the text comes up a bit. So before and after. So that's the normal state and hover state. And the best thing about XD, to be honest, is that everything is automatically animated. So you just have to set up the 2 states, and the in-between animation will be generated with the auto animate feature. By the way, it took me some time to realize where the guides are in XD when I first used them, because there's no rulers like in Illustrator, Photoshop, or InDesign. Instead, all you have to do is to come to the edge of your artboard and then drag the guide out from there. The same thing you can do from the left side. You won't find these features on the bottom or on the right side, so it's only on the left and the top. And then when you don't need a guide anymore, just drag it out of the artboard to remove it. So let's take a look at this icon here on the right, the composition icon. This is already a component. The way I can tell is because it has a green outline. Normal objects would have blue outline. Anything green will mean that it's already set up as a component. And by the way, here on the left side at the bottom, you have the assets panel where you can keep track of all of your components. So it will give you a list of them. And of course, you can also name them. I haven't bothered naming them, so they are just the default names that came in with the icons. By the way, these icons are from Noun Project. The link is in the description below. Check it out. It's a free resource site with loads of really quality icons. And I really love to work with them in XD because I can add these simple animations that you already seen on the other two icons. But let's see what we can do here. So first of all, this component doesn't have a hover state yet, so it just has the default state. So first, what we need to do is to add the hover state, but maybe even before that, I am going to combine the text into this component. All I have to do is to cut it, so Command or Control X, then select the component, double click on it, which means that we enter the source of this component, and then press Command or Control V to paste in the text. It will remember where it was, so the position won't change. But if I click away and click back again, now you can see that the text and the icon is in a single component. Components work like groups in Illustrator, and when you double click, it's almost like using isolation mode. So now let's add the hover state. So we just click on this little plus sign here and choose hover state. And you can even rename it if you want, the state itself, because you can create as many states as you wish. But I'm going to keep it as is. And instead, I'm going to double click inside this component and drag the text up to this guide. And then I will also change its color and use the eyedropper tool and pick this color here from the text. Now I should have saved this already as a swatch, but I can always reference it from there. And if we now select this and go back to default state and then press Command or Control Enter, we can already see that effect working. And you can see already how cool this auto animate feature is. So we just had to set up the two endpoints and it creates that effect. And it even uses easing between the two states. So now it's time to add a bit more interest and animate the icon like I've done on these other ones as well. So let's just go back here, select the component, go to hover state and then double click to be able to select the icon itself. So there we are, and I am going to resize it. So holding down Alt and Shift key together, I can resize it, but you can see that it changes the proportion of the items inside it. Now that is happening because by default, there is a feature in XD called responsive resize. So if you want just a simple resize, what you need to do is to go back to the default state, and that's where you can turn this feature off. So I'm just going to do that, then go back to hover state, double click, again, select all of these elements, and then holding down Alt and Shift, I'm going to resize the icon to something like that. Maybe that's a little bit too big, and also maybe we can move it down slightly. And then once again, the color I'm going to just pick from here. All right, so now if we go back to the default state, we can check before, after. That looks good, but we can also test it out like this. Very nice, simple animation there. But I would like to also have a little bit more interest on this. So once again, in the hover state, I just come inside it. But this time I'm only going to select these details here in the middle, and I will just simply rotate them around, maybe to somewhere there. And maybe we can also move it slightly up. All right. Now, once again, let's not forget to go back to the default state and then check this out. We go into preview mode and there you have the beautiful animation of the rotation, resizing, color change, and the text moving up and down. Believe me, if you do presentations like this, everyone will be amazed and it really feels much more professional than just simple slides one after another. Before we continue, I just wanted to let you know about our creative membership program. For a small monthly fee, you get access to over 200 hours of Adobe certified online training courses. Master all the tools and skills needed to become a professional graphic designer or illustrator. As a pro member, you will get mentoring from me and my team, access to webinars, student forum, and creative briefs to help you build an outstanding portfolio. Pro members can also download the project files for all of our YouTube tutorials. Sign up at yesimadesigner.com/memberships and start your free trial today. And now let's head back to the tutorial. So since we now have the animation, let's go back into prototype mode and select this component, zoom out a bit, and then drag out the interaction to go to this composition slide. By the way, I wanted to mention that these other little lines here are actually representing those hover effects that we just built. So with the little lightning bolt, that means there is a hover effect on this component, but that's not going to take it away from this slide. It has to be an actual tap that's going to move on to the next slide. And since we are building the interactions, let me show you how you can use even custom keyboard shortcuts to move between the slides. So let's just say we are on the main slide and we would like to go to the type slide very quickly. If I use this little arrow, I can drag it here onto the type or typography slide. And then instead of tab this time, I'm going to say keys and gamepad. And then we can just use a key, in this case maybe T, that will move on to that slide. Then let's do the same thing again. So once again, another interaction for which we will use another key, in this case C for color, and then once again another one for composition. Well, maybe L this time for layout, since they are both the same first letter. So let's test this out. I'm going to go into preview mode, and if I press T, it goes there. Let's go back to the main slide. C goes to color theory. And when I press L, it goes to composition. Brilliant. Now, if you want to be even more advanced, you can even use voice commands for moving between the slides. And once again, this can make your presentation so fun and cool. So if I again add another interaction, let's just say go there. Instead of the keys and gamepad, now I'm going to choose voice, and I can just enter the voice command and say color. When I press enter, now this is also added. And notice that here on the top, it tells me that there's two interactions assigned between this slide, the main slide, and color theory. One is that keyboard shortcut that we assign, and now this voice command. So let's test this out. I'm going to go into preview mode again. And there is a little note at the bottom saying that you have to hold down the space bar if you want to activate voice commands. So let's try this out. Color. Cool. XD understood what I meant. All right, that's brilliant. So that's all I wanted to show you about the navigation. So you can use keyboard shortcuts, you can use your voice commands, and of course you can also use tap interactions as we've seen before. Now, if this is not cool enough and you want to be even more advanced, you can actually create a sticky menu. You can see this here on the right side. So I'm going to set this up. This is just a default graphic at this point, but I am going to align it somewhere here on the right side. Yeah, I think that's going to work. And it's probably better if we stay in design mode for now. So there we have all of the elements that we need for this. And I will turn this into a component. So there's a shortcut for that, Command or Control K. And notice how the green outlines appear now. So now we can add a hover state for this. Let's just add that there and then simply move it down. But when I go into the component area here and I switch between the two states, notice that nothing is happening. Now this is because by simply moving the component around in two states, it's not actually recording its position. So what you need to do is to set up your default state position first. So let's just go up here where we wanted it originally, then select the hover state, and in this state, double click onto the component, select everything. That's Command or Control A. That will only select stuff inside it. Once again, remember it's like isolation mode in Illustrator. And then holding down the Shift key, I'm going to drag it down a bit, somewhere around there. Now, when I click away, come back to it, it will now remember these two states. So default is when it's outside, and then when I hover over the little arrow, it's going to come down. Now, there's another brilliant feature that I'm going to use for this sticky menu, and that's the fixed position when scrolling. If I turn this on, and I press Command or Control Enter to test this out, we will be able to see that it actually stays there on the top. So no matter where I am within this slide, in this case, it's always going to stay there. But what we have to make sure is we also come back here and set it back to default state. This is something you have to always remember when you set up components with animation or several states, is that if you want it to work properly, you have to make sure you set it back to default state before you test your prototype. So let's test it again. Now you can see it's just a simple arrow there on the top, and when I hover over it, the menu comes down. And now we just have to set up the interactions. So let's switch to prototype mode, select this, and we are already in hover state, which is perfect. So I'm going to double click inside it. There's the little icon, and we just have to drag that out onto this other slide. Now make sure that it's set to tap and not voice. It will always remember your last used interaction. So I will keep it on tap, and all the additional settings are fine. Then let's just do the same thing with this other icon. This needs to go here. So because we are already on color theory, maybe this can be grayed out a bit. For that, I'm going to go back to design and maybe just reduce the intensity of this to 50%, maybe even less, 25. Okay, so now we can test this out. If I go back into default state and go back to preview, when I hover over, it comes up and these two are working. Let's just go on to typography. That's great. Once again, I'm just going to go back to color theory, test out the other icon. That works perfectly as well. So now what we need to do is to copy this whole thing. So I select the sticky menu that we built, Command or Control C, and then Command or Control V on this side. And I will do the same with this slide as well. There you go, and it will remember all the settings. So what we need to do now is to go into prototype mode, switch to hover state, and here we just have to make sure that it has the connection to the color theory slide as well. So I'm just going to double click and assign an interaction to that slide, but also going back to design mode, I would like this to be set to 100% opacity, and instead I'm going to change this one on the right and reduce it down to 25% like before. Now we can set this back to default state and test things out. So when I hover over it, it comes up, and we can go to color theory, where when it comes up, it remembers the specific settings for this slide. So we can now switch between these two, which works great. And then we still have to set up the version for typography. So let's just go to that slide. I'm going to just repeat the same steps. So I select this component and I will go into hover state. And in this state, I am going to make sure that this icon here, so double clicking on it, will be reduced in opacity to 25%. And then this other one should be set back to 100%. And then I just have to do the prototype now. So for color, we need to go there, and the composition is already there thanks to the fact that it was a component. So it looks a little bit complicated, but believe me, once you start doing this, it will be second nature and you can set things up very quickly and easily. So once again, let's just test things out. If I come back to the main slide, we can come to whichever we want. Let's go to typography, and oh yes, I forgot to set this back to default state. So that's important. We go back, go to default state, and that's the way it is. So now if we just start here, I can hover over. Yep, looks good. We can go to color, we can go to composition, and we can go back to type, and so on and so forth. So now we built several different ways of navigation. We have obviously the back arrows, we have our sticky menu, we also have voice commands and even keyboard shortcuts. But if this is still not enough, if you have two screens available when you are presenting, you can also use the actual design in the background for navigation. So I'm just going to make this window a little bit smaller, and I'll show you that if I click here in the background on specific slides, let's say I click on the main slide, notice how quickly my presentation switches to that. So this can also be used to very quickly move between slides. And of course, in the background, I can still zoom in and out and find the relevant slide I want to jump to. So that's almost like your table of contents. And this really only works well if you have two separate screens. So if you can use the projector as a second screen and it's not mirrored to your laptop, then I would recommend also maybe to use this functionality. And since we've seen how to work with components, I actually have a cool example here on this slide. If I just scroll further down, that I built. So with components, you can do much more than just simply having simple animations for buttons and stuff like that. You can actually create interactive games or even quizzes if you want. So for kerning, for example, here I created a hover effect which can show before and after. So text without kerning and then with kerning. The same thing here on the right side as well. So all this is another component with 4 separate characters put together into a group, and then simply we again have for this component a default state and a hover state, and the color also changes between the 2 states. Similarly to this, on the composition slide, if I just show you this quickly, we have another hover effect which can show how hierarchy can improve a design. So that's before, and then when we hover over, that's after. So this is again another great way of presenting stuff. So instead of switching between slides, you can just use your cursor, hover over, or even use stuff like voice command, show before, show after, and that way you can interact with your components. As I said, using these methods, you can actually build really cool interactive quizzes and games. And if you would like me to record another video on that, let me know in the comment section below and I will make sure I will cover it in an upcoming video. But before we finish, let me show you one additional thing. It's another brilliant feature called anchor links in XD, with which you can build the following thing. So here in color theory, which we have a quite long slide. And what I've done here is that we have these little icons on the top or images. And if I click on complementary, it scrolls to that part within the slide. If I click on analog, we go to that, and so on and so forth. This is again a very simple thing that you can build. So let's just say if we want to use this as an anchor link, all we have to do is to go to prototype and then simply click on the little arrow, not click and drag in this case, just click and then keep the trigger on tap, but change the type to scroll to. There's loads of different types, but this is the one we need in this case. And you just have to set the destination, which in this case will be the triad, which I think is this one, while not the easiest color. Yes, that's the triadic colors. And we can check this out, how this works. So if I go into preview mode and click on triad, it scrolls straight there. Now, the only problem is that there is no space on the top, so it completely goes right onto the first line of this. So it doesn't give any space above it. So to avoid that problem, I will just go back to design mode, select this paragraph, and notice that I'm using the frame format or area text format and not point text. I prefer to work with area text always. And with this, I can simply add some empty spaces before these lines, position it where I want it. And now when we test it again and go to triad, you can see that empty space above it. It's almost like a top margin that you build into your anchor link. And that is all I wanted to show you in this video, but believe me, we are literally just scratching the surface of what you can do with XD when it comes to presentations. And I've never been a big fan of PowerPoint. However, it's also a good tool. I feel like XD is so much closer to my heart because I can work exactly the same way I would work for mobile prototypes and use the same tools and settings, but for presenting things in a much more engaging and interactive way. If this video helps you to build something in XD, make sure you share the public URL in the comment section below, and I'm going to check it out and let you know what I think. Thanks a lot for watching. Like and share this video if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified whenever we release new videos. Click on the link on my right and start your membership today to get access to over 200 hours of training courses and personal mentoring by me and my team of creative professionals. Have fun learning, guys, and I will see you in the next one.